We need to make sense of these buildings everywhere that do not add up to the capabilities of the peoples we're told who built them. Through my own theological journey, and I've also understood the idea that tribulation is unfolding and we are not in the post-millennial kingdom, and for a long time I was also in that camp, also looking for the signs of Revelations to unfold. The end is nigh. Many of these signs you're waiting for would have already happened and become buried in history if it was true, but there is precedence to consider this angle, and also to make sense of the lengths that must have been pursued to hide it, to hide the existence of Jesus Christ ruling for 1,000 years on earth. We need to make sense of these buildings everywhere that do not add up to the capabilities of the peoples we're told who built them. The complexity of some of these structures baffles the mind. It's mind-boggling, okay? And it's hard to believe that people with, horse and carriages and rope pulleys and perhaps some metallurgy behind them to create some kind of things to pull rocks could create such things in such a short amount of time as they claim they were built, and even tear them down in such a short time afterwards. If you look at some of the historical photos of some of the buildings that are now gone, which were built and then within 20 years destroyed. This also doesn't make any sense when you look at these buildings, because they are beautiful and they are intense and would have been extremely labor intensive, if possible, if it was even possible for them to do with their tools and their capabilities. So these things do have to be understood and answered at the end of the day. 1,000 years ignored and called something else like the Dark Ages rather than what it truly was, which is an age of truth and light ruled by the Son of God. These ancient, far more clearly ancient megalithic structures with stones so huge it baffles the mind to consider how any human was capable of moving these such a long time ago under any circumstance, with such a bizarre stonework design, like they're melted into each other with razor thin gaps between the stones, almost non-existent gaps. The accuracy involved and the work involved to build these far ancient, enormous megalithic structures. Yes, I can believe they were probably built a long time ago before the flood of Noah, because they look like they've been through a flood. They are destroyed, they are battered, they are weathered. The pyramids are just crumbling, but they still stand today, but they are a mess. So anything that was before the flood would look equally as battered. Like, they were built a long time ago, yes, but not that long ago. But what they do seem to have gone through is some kind of bizarre, slight minor inconvenience of being buried a little bit. Which again is strange, because you don't build these type of buildings slightly underground. Like these windows that are partially underground, that peek up to the horizon, to the walking level, to the street below. It's kind of like, why would you build like that? Why would you lay your foundations like that in such a way? And these aren't necessarily like basement rooms that we're talking about. These are levels to the building that just happen to be slightly underground, and then there's a basement below them. These evidences all around us that our history is a lie. Something happened that we're not being told, or it's been covered up in some way. And there's been this timeline created, this chronology we'll call it, which we have just taken for granted as the truth, which was formed by perhaps less than reputable characters. You look at the rings on trees and things like this. At best, they're highly questionable. There aren't that many old trees on Earth. Now, there are trees, yes, that you can find that maybe are 1,000 years old, 2,000 years old. Some claim to be 5,000 to 6,000 years old. But when you get to that level and you look at these trees that are supposedly that old, they are practically dead. They are weathered, decayed, decrepit. They look like they've been battered, perhaps by a flood of some kind. Where are the really old, great, huge, enormous trees that have lived and continued on? Where are they? And there aren't that many. Most of the Earth's forestry is quite young. So that has to be taken into account too. That's okay, so Israel has been created in the 40s, so that means, we must be at this point right now. Where does that fit into it? Could it be possible that this Israel you talk about that's been created as a nation today in a specific geographical location is smoke and mirrors, and it's not really the one discussed in Revelations. The aim is to make you continuously believe Jesus is about to return. The deceptions used against us are enormous. Okay, so if Millennial Kingdom has come and gone, then what? I'm not an authority on anything. I'm a guy who has thoughts, who's speaking them out loud. As a man of faith, I believe I need to speculate about all possible possibilities and their inevitable outcomes, so I'm not deceived when whatever happens, happens. Making war with the camp of saints is just simply being against Jesus Christ, the true Jesus. Itching your ears and doctrines that make you feel good rather than the truth, The fire coming down from heaven thing at the very, very, very end happens. And how people will not see it coming. Because once the whole world is deceived and the whole world is under the system created by this false Jesus, then fire would have come down from heaven, because the entire camp of saints is then fully encircled by his enemies. Because everybody in that time during the short season picked the wrong side, about to happen. And you might see on the screen right here, for example, these are from like the 20s, the 1920s, the 1940s perhaps, when these photos were taken. And you see men walking around with the end is nigh signs. And it's like, you think about that concept, like, what does that actually mean? The end is nigh? I mean, if these people are Christians, surely they should have signs saying things like, the beginning is nigh, Jesus is about to return, don't worry guys, because when Jesus returns, that's not the end. That's not what the book says. Really, it's the beginning of his reign. It's a good thing. Only Jesus' enemies would worry about the end being nigh, wouldn't they? Would worry so much about Jesus returning that they would consider it an apocalyptic event. So these people who had these signs were probably people who had this type of belief I'm talking about here. What if they genuinely believe, no, the literal end is about to happen, and a new heaven and earth is about to be created. Final great white throne judgment is about to happen. The end, not Jesus coming in 1,000 years and then the end. He means, no, we're at the end of all that. The literal end is nigh.